Hi there, this is Ronnie coming at you with a video. Um, this morning, thanks to my media player, I watched the latest video from Pear of Geeks. Now I say thanks for that because it was just short of 2 hours and 10, which is... I get a little angsty watching videos that long on my laptop. Whereas, because of the media player, I can watch it on my TV. So it's, I can just sit back and relax and watch it. What has been happening over the month of August is this thing called RPG a day, where every day RPG YouTube bloggers and so on answer a question. And I didn't do it this year. In fact, I haven't done it at all. But I certainly didn't do it this year because I saw the questions and I realised by about day 12 I would have said Castle Falkenstein so many times I think I would have lost subscription from people. I think people would have said, "Oh, for God's sake, not Falkenstein again! Stop it! Stop boring us!" So I decided not to do it. But Becky and Jason decided rather than do a video a day, they decided to do a big video and answer all the questions in one go, which is fair enough. First of all, they did a very nice shout out for me. Thank you very much. And if you haven't subscribed to their channel, please do so. It's good. I will put a link to their video below where they answer all the questions. It's a lot of fun. It's good humoured, and although it goes on some tangents sometimes, it's always an interesting conversation. The only frustration I have sometimes is I look at this conversation, I listen to the conversation, I want to be part of the conversation. They did make mention of Castle Falkenstein at one point, which they were asking for comments from me about, which I will actually comment in their video. But one of the questions came up and it was discussed, and that was about what mashup would you like to see that doesn't already exist. And I wanted to sort of touch on that because it was an interesting discussion within the video. I don't really think there is a mashup that hasn't been done. For those completely in the dark, a mashup is taking two or more genres and putting them together as one. Prime example of this would be taking fantasy and taking cyberpunk and putting them together and giving you Shadowrun. I certainly agree with Becky about if you wanted to do Game of Thrones in space, or at least have that feel of Game of Thrones in space, Space Master is actually a good bet. Actually, Classic Traveller has that same feel. The other one, which didn't get mentioned, which I think really would just hit that right on, is Fading Suns, which is a game I've always kind of wanted, but again it falls in the category of brilliant background. I'm not sure about the mechanics. I think it would be one that I would want to maybe see if someone can get a license and do it for a generic system. But I don't know that there's a mashup that hasn't been done that I think should be done. And what I mean is there are probably mashups that haven't been done, like Mexican wrestlers in Renaissance Europe, but quite frankly, Lucadors versus musketeers. I know it's not quite Renaissance musketeers, but still. I'm not sure I would want to do that. Most of the other ones, someone went, oh, let's mix Wild Wisp with horror, and we have Deadlands. Someone said, let's mix high fantasy with sci-fi, and we got Dragonstar for the D20 system. I know there are other, what they call science fantasy. The generic systems have a leg up on this. Things like Fate and GURPS and Savage Worlds and True 20 and Win Elvis. True 20 not so much, because it didn't get the support it really should have gotten. But the other three have a lot of generic systems. Going with the sort of science fantasy one that I just mentioned with Dragonstar. All of those, GURPS, Fate and Savage Worlds, you can buy generic guidebooks. There's ones on drivethrurpg.com for Fate. I can't remember the people who do them, but it's like Fate Fantasy and Fate High Space and so on. And you could easily get the fantasy one and the space, the sci-fi one, and mash them together. Similarly, with Savage Worlds, I could easily get the fantasy companion, the sci-fi companion, and meld them. But I agree with Becky on a point. They wouldn't be original. You're just taking other people's ideas. I think it's very difficult to be completely original these days in a genre. I think you can come up with perhaps an interesting mechanic. I think you can perhaps come up with an interesting way of doing things, but actual settings and so on, very difficult. I'm not going to say impossible, because that says far more about my limited view rather than the view of others. But I think the more different systems and different ideas come out, the narrower the gap of originality becomes. And I think it is the case that I'll give an example: Shadowrun, which I have owned at one point, both the 2nd edition and the 4th edition. I thought the 4th edition was a better version. I know some people prefer the older version of it. I didn't like the 2nd edition. I thought it was overly complex. I thought the 4th edition was better, but I still couldn't completely get my head around it. And I think that had more to do with the fact that cyberpunk as a genre is not one I am as immersed in as others. But if I wanted to run something like Shadowrun, it would end up being Savage Worlds. It would end up being Interface Zero, which is a sort of major sort of cyberpunk campaign setting for Savage Worlds, which I'm running online at the moment. Not right now, but I have an online game for that. And just adding aspects from the fantasy companion into it, if I so wished, to give a sort of Shadowrun-esque world. But I really would just be aping the setting. But I think what makes the setting unique, I think what does make settings unique, are the players. The GM, the players, your ideas, your perspectives, the way you shape the world, the tack that you take with a rule system or a setting will make that unique. It will give it an individual flavour. I could run Call of Cthulhu. And I will run it the way that I enjoy running a game. I'd get ideas, people start bouncing off and so on. But the way I would run a game would be different from the way someone else would run it. And that's down to just the individual people and the perspective and the kind of view that you're looking through. So each individual game sort of mix, but we all know this. So I think that's where true originality lies. With interesting characters and the view of the world. So in answer to the question, what mashup would I want to see that hasn't been done yet? Short answer is none. They've all been done. And I can either get those sort of official mashups, or I can use other systems to emulate it. I mean, if you really want to be a masochist to yourself and a sadist to your players, by all means get a hold of Rolemaster, get a hold of Spacemaster, and do science fantasy using those two systems, and I guarantee you your players will hate you. I mean, I still own Spacemaster. Never use it. The background's interesting. I can pillage the background for stuff, but I'm not going to use the actual rule system. Because it's really, it just doesn't flow for me anymore. Other systems that will do it better. So yeah, that's my my video on this. As I say, I will put a link to the video below. And if you don't mind slightly rambling in the 2 hours 10, it is entertaining, answering role-playing questions, the occasional review of beer, and sort of rambling about board games and this and that and all the rest of it. It's a lot of fun to watch. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon with another video.